So Gary, welcome to Constituting America's Constitutional Chats. We're so excited to have you with us today. And we're going to turn it over to you for some opening comments on how a convention of the states might work to amend the U.S. Constitution.
Well, thank you, Kathy. This is a great honor for me, and I'm excited to share the information we have. Kudos to Constituting America for enlivening America's youth and getting to know the Constitution and love it. So let me share my screen here to give you some slides that will talk us through this topic. Yes, I was the chair of the Virginia Delegation in a simulated convention that was held here in Williamsburg in 2023. It wasn't the first one. The Convention of States Foundation had held a similar one a few years earlier. So what's a Convention of States, and could it really happen? Yes, it can. But Congress has not proposed a constitutional amendment to the states since 1978. That's 47 years. It's a long time, not the longest we have gone without a constitutional amendment. It was 61 years between the 12th and the 13th Amendments. But the 26th Amendment was the last one that Congress proposed and was actually ratified in 1971, became part of the Constitution at that time. But in 1978, they proposed a constitutional amendment that would make the District of Columbia, or give the District of Columbia voting rights. It's called the District of Columbia Voting Rights Amendment, and it was only ratified by 16 of the 38 states within the 7-year time limit that Congress gave it. So it did not become part of the Constitution, but that was the last one that Congress actually proposed. So we know that a convention of states comes from Article 5. We heard that 2 weeks ago. On the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, Congress shall call a convention for proposing amendments. And that is really, really necessary today. Could it happen? Yes, it has happened twice through simulations, once in real time, that I'll discuss at the end here. It was kind of late breaking news. But we had a simulated convention in 2016 here in Williamsburg, and then in August of 2023 that I participated in. It was hosted by a Convention of States Foundation, and they have a website that you'll see in a moment that has all the details about this convention as it was conducted. This is what their website looks like. It's there's a 2-hour video on the front page, the landing page, but there's other videos further down in the website and documents that you will find interesting. I'll talk about some of those as we go. So all this information is available for your perusal. Here's one screenshot from the attendance list of the convention, the simulated convention. I only show it so that you can see that most of the delegates to this event were in fact state representatives and senators, state legislatures, people who have legislative experience and are in favor, obviously, of this kind of an event. The Virginia delegation consisted of myself. Delegate Karen Greenhaw was initially a part of the delegation, but she had to withdraw because of some events in her delegate schedule that prevented it. Mr. Steve Bradbury and Mrs. Jane Strake were both from Heritage Foundation. They lived in Northern Virginia, and they made up the remainder of our delegation. All 50 states were represented, and in delegations of either 1 to 3 persons. There were 2 full days of deliberations on a Thursday and Friday. We adjourned at 5 p.m. on Friday. And during the 2 days, we formed 3 working committees. One working committee that was tasked with considering amendment ideas that involved fiscal restraints, placing fiscal restraints on Congress or the federal government itself. The second committee worked on federal legislative and executive jurisdiction restrictions or enhancements. I was on that committee. Then there was a third committee that considered term limits, a very lively topic. and federal jurisdiction, judicial jurisdiction. And Steve Bradbury and Janie were on that committee. The first order of business, of course, was to elect a convention chair and vice. The rules had already been distributed and agreed to in advance. Otherwise, they would have been the second order of business in any sort of actual convention. Speaking of rules, you can download the simulated convention rules from their website and see exactly how we proceeded or how we agreed to proceed. And I note that on the very first page of the rules, wherever the rules as agreed to did not govern a particular situation, then Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure, which all these state legislators were familiar with, would be the guiding principle. And so a lot of people think that this will easily get out of hand, but I wanted you to see that there's already a set of procedures that most of these legislators would be familiar with. The three committees, of course, met and within their committee considered proposals for amendment ideas that fit the three criteria, the criteria that they'd been tasked with considering. Those proposals were discussed, their advantages and disadvantages were discussed, and then within the committee a vote was taken. And an amendment idea had, of course, to pass with a majority vote of the committee members in order to be reported to the plenary session. Here's a screenshot from our schedule. We began, of course, with a roll call to make sure everyone was present, an invocation, the Pledge of Allegiance, the election of the president of and vice of the convention, and then some announcements. And then at 10 o'clock, we got right to it in the three committees. So there's just an example that all this had been planned out in advance, and it went very, very smoothly. So the output of those three committees were thus. The Federal Term Limits and Judicial Jurisdiction Committee produced an amendment proposal that would deal with congressional term limits. And back in 2016, that was also a proposal of that committee. The Fiscal Restraints Committee proposed two amendment ideas. One, which would place limits on increasing the national debt, a very timely topic today. And the second one that would require a 3/5 vote for Congress to impose or raise taxes rather than just a majority vote as is currently the rule. And then the third committee actually produced three proposals, three amendment proposals. One would define and limit Congress's power to regulate interstate commerce. I actually drafted that one myself and got that through the committee and to the plenary session and approved. Proposal 2 gave the states the power to abrogate laws passed by Congress. And of course, there were some restrictions on the states and how they would do that. But that was a very important check and balance, if you will, on the power of Congress. If the states don't agree with a law passed by Congress, then under this proposal, if it would become part of the Constitution, they could abrogate that law. And the third proposal gave Congress the power to prevent proposed federal regulations from taking effect, a much more streamlined proposal than they have under the current Administrative Procedures Act. So back in 2016, these were the proposals that got out of committee, as I've already mentioned some of them. And late breaking news, just last week, I learned of this. In 2017, the year after the first simulated convention, there was an actual convention of the states. It was not a full Article 5 convention in the sense of considering proposed amendments, but it met to discuss and agree to the requirements for a balanced budget amendment convention, a convention that would be formed just for that one topic. It met from September 12th to the 15th in Phoenix, Arizona. It was the very first actual convention of states in 150 years in our history. 19 states participated, and 72 delegates commissioned by their states were in attendance. Now you can find a short video about this event on the Phoenix BBA, Balanced Budget Amendment Planning Convention, on Hunt for Liberty's website. You can also see information about this on the Federal Fiscal Sustainability Foundation's website. So out of this grew a coalition of organizations that, as we are speaking, are planning on getting a convention of the states underway this October. And their planning is well in hand, and I can't speak a whole lot about the details. I'm not exactly part of that coalition, but I've been briefed on where they stand and where they're proceeding to hopefully have a convention this October. So there are a lot of organizations and individuals that don't think a convention of states is a good idea. Obviously, we heard 2 weeks ago that it was George Mason who proposed this alternative method for proposing amendments to the Constitution for one purpose. What if Congress becomes an obstacle to advancing needful amendments? This is a check on an obstructive Congress. So, but there are criticisms that we hear from time to time. The first one, the convention will somehow substitute a new constitution, an entirely new constitution in place of the one we have. Well, the standard critique is that this would be just like 1787, where the convention substituted a new plan of government for the Articles of Confederation. That's easily refutable because this convention would operate under the auspices of Article 5. And Article 5 makes it very clear that this convention would be only to propose amendments, not a new constitution. It's also been criticized that the convention would propose unreasonable amendment ideas. Well, I hate to break this to everyone, but today there's a constitutional convention meeting in, well, perhaps not today because Congress is on recess, but every day that Congress meets, proposed amendment ideas are submitted. They're sent to the Judiciary Committee where they die a natural death. So if unreasonable ideas are suggested, well, they have to get through a committee first, and then they have to get through, if they get through the convention, they have to get through the thoughts of 38 state legislatures. The left or the right will take over the convention. Well, that's not a real possibility when you have the rule being one state, one vote. So in any case, anything that comes out of this convention must pass muster with 38 states to become part of the Constitution. Congress will simply ignore new amendments. Well, we are the people that hold Congress to abiding by the Constitution. Another complaint is we're now so polarized. The convention will agree on nothing. Well, that's a possibility because, yes, we are quite polarized. But if there's a good idea suggested in this convention, and it isn't a good idea, then it will advance with a majority vote of the convention and likely achieve a ratification by 38 states. We don't know who will attend or their belief system. Are they going to believe as the founders of this country believed? Well, that's unknowable and unforeseeable. But we know that people who come to this convention have a job to do. They realize they have a job to do for the American people, and they will do that job. The Constitution needs no revision. Well, I would argue that it needs revision because the Supreme Court decisions over 200 years have drastically changed the founders' vision for a government of limited and enumerated powers, which I think is easy to refute today. Perhaps there will be a lot of liberals at this convention, as well as conservatives, yes, and majoritarianism will prevail. Congress is not given the authority under the Constitution for setting rules of the convention. Their authority is merely to call the convention, determine its place and time of meeting. Big states will dominate. Well, it is every convention of the states that has ever been held in our nation's history has always used the rule of one state, one vote. And I don't see any deviation from that. So I would close my opening remarks by asking these 5 questions. Will Congress ever propose term limits on their own members? Will Congress ever propose a repeal of the 17th Amendment that would restore true federalism? And boy, that would be a great topic for a future webinar. Will Congress ever propose any limitations on its existing power? I think not. Are amendments needed to help restore the framers' view of a limited government of enumerated powers? I think it is. And then if those questions are all answered in the negative or in the affirmative, then who or what will ever cause these amendments, these needful amendments, to be presented to the states for their consideration and ratification? I'll take your questions now.
Well, thank you, Gary. That was a fascinating presentation, and it's just really interesting that you've actually participated in a simulation of one of these conventions. So I know we've got a lot of questions, and Janine, we'll start with you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be having this conversation. And Gary Porter, hi, and welcome to the
Hi,
show.
Janine.
Hi.
Haven't
Thanks.
seen you in a long while.
I know, and we just respect you so much, and you've done so many tremendous um, papers and things of this nature for our foundation, articles, and we're just very grateful for you and for our collaboration with you. Okay, this was quite the intriguing opening, and it was so good that I took a bunch of notes. So I'm just going to walk through my notes with you. Okay,
Yep.
they're not in any real order necessarily. Okay, my first question is: I believe you said Congress gave DC the DC amendment proposal that they wanted to make DC a state 7 years to gain 2/3 of the states. Did you mean the U.S. Congress? And is that in the Constitution? I didn't. Do they have the right when a convention of states wants to be called to limit the amount of years to get it going, or was this? I don't
No,
understand that.
the 7-year time limit pertained to the DC Voting Rights Amendment only. You may recall that the Equal Rights Amendment was sent to the states with a time limit in which it could be ratified. And that time limit was even extended, and it was not ratified within the extended time limit. So it's up to Congress's purview, and the Supreme Court has not told them they can't do this. But yes, they can put a time limit on the ratification of an amendment. And now that has
Okay.
nothing to do with convening a convention.
Yeah, I guess I didn't catch all of that. So, in other words, our Congress gave 7 years for the ratification, and for the students that are on, what that means is they passed the original proposal of the amendment, but it had to be approved by the states, 3/4 of the states, which would be about 38 states. So, let me go back to this question. Does that mean that DC to become a state? That was passed by the actual U.S. Congress, and then it had just never got ratified?
No, it would not have created a District of Columbia as a state. It would have only given the residents of the District of Columbia voting rights. It would not create a state out of the district.
Okay, well, okay, thank you for the understanding that. But I guess my overriding question is, did Congress pass, not a convention of states, but the DC Congress, they passed uh, a proposal to the amendment to the Constitution that DC would have voting rights. And so that one came
Yes,
through the Congress.
that came through the Congress.
What year was that?
That was 1978.
1978. Okay. So that's why Congress gave limited 7 years for ratification. So I guess my next question is, because it went through the US Congress. If it goes through the Convention of States, so let's say a Convention of States is called that wants to make DC a state or give them voting rights. The US Congress would not have the right to say you have 7 years, 8 years, 9 years for ratification. The state's convention would set the stipulations on ratification, correct?
That's absolutely correct. And I doubt that the Convention of the States would set a time limit, but I think that is within their purview to do so. Now you may remember there's an amendment out there right now that could be ratified. It was introduced in 1789 as the very first article. It was never ratified in 1789 through 1791, but it could still be ratified today because it was proposed with no time limit. The
What
original
was that?
the original first article that would have made representation a ratio of one representative to every 50,000 residents. And it was never ratified then, but it could be ratified today. And an interesting thing is it would produce a Congress of 6,800 representatives.
That was my next question. Would that be they'd run out of room up there in DC?
Yes, there'd be some administrative details that would have to be worked out.
Oh
But
gosh.
the point is that could still be ratified today if 38 states saw value to it.
Interesting. Okay, fabulous. Thank you for that answer. Now, when you did your mock convention of states, you got there, and according to what I saw on the screen there, you had a few different topics. I think that is what people are afraid of, is that a convention of states would be called and then everyone would get there and kind of rub their fingers together and say, oh, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. And I think that's when people worry about a runaway Congress, or people not being an elite, they wouldn't have an allegiance to the founding documents. But I like this one topic idea. Talk about the two different ways to call a convention of states, and how can you guarantee that? And I'm actually for a convention of states, but can you guarantee with a convention of states that it could be one topic and it wouldn't become a runaway where people like happen to
Well, I
actually
think
start this convention?
if this group I talked about, this coalition, is successful in getting a convention going this October, it will be for the purpose of a single purpose of a balanced budget amendment,
But
because that
how
is
do
their
they specify?
focus.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt. How do they specify that and keep it? I mean, what's the like regulation that it has to be one topic?
Well, two ways of doing that. First of all, the call for the convention that goes to the states for their consideration, the call would, I think, in this case, say that the purpose of this convention is to compose a balanced budget amendment, period, end of story. Now, once the convention convenes, then the delegates who have been sent there under that auspices to compose a balanced budget amendment will, I mean, if they're honorable people, they will constrain themselves to the authority that they've been given. Now, the credentials that the states give these delegates to take with them to the convention, those credentials could also state that your authority in going to this convention is to only consider and vote on a balanced budget amendment. And if their credentials state that, then they are honor bound to abide by those credentials.
Well, I guess my next question is, what if the state that is sending the delegates don't say that? What if,
Well,
say, Maryland, or that they say, hey, we know it's for one topic, but try to get B, C, and D.
Well, if there are 45 state delegations that are there for a balanced budget amendment and 5 that go there for a plenary authority to consider anything, then I suspect that the 45 state delegations will tell the 5 state delegations to go to their corner and color. I mean, that the 45 state delegations are going to abide by the limited purpose of this convention.
But
Majoritarian,
there is no control when states send their delegates of what they dictate to them to do.
no, and there in the simulated convention that I attended, I could have introduced a proposal for an amendment that had nothing to do with jurisdictional issues, and I'd have been laughed out of the committee.
Huh. Okay. Where did you get the number 45?
Oh, I just picked that out of the air. If there were 45 states that, agreed to constrain their delegations to that sole purpose of the convention,
Mm-hmm.
and 5 rogue states, if you will, that didn't do that, then the subject or the principle of majoritarianism is going to prevail.
Well, we would hope. I think that's what people worry about, because it was a little bit like what happened with the Articles of Confederation it became the Constitution, right?
Well, as I said earlier, that is a poor example of what could happen in an Article 5 convention, because that convention in 1787 was not performed under the auspices of Article 5. Article 5 didn't exist at that time.
But does Article 5 limit it to one topic? It doesn't.
No, but the states can limit it to one topic if they choose.
If they choose. I think that's what everybody's worried about. Though, again, I'm for a convention. Can you, for our students out there, let's do the math. 2/3 of the states have to say yes and show up for the convention, and 3/4 of the states have to ratify it. Tell us what 2/3 is. I did my math here, but I'm going to let you say it. How many states? How many states are 2/3?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, 34.
Okay, that's what I had. And
Well,
then 3/4.
33.33.
Yeah, I had 33. Okay. And then 3/4 of the states.
That'll be 38.
Okay, that's what I had. I just didn't want to put that out there until I was sure. Okay, so 33 states have to be called, have to say, yes, we want to send a representative to the Convention of States. It's one of my favorite things in the Constitution, by the way, is this check and balance. This is probably one of my favorite check and balances. And then once they come up with it, 38 states have to say yes. Now let's. I don't know what my time frame is, but I probably have time for about two more quick questions. The 33 states that go, explain
34.
to our students who are listening, they are picked through the state legislatures in their capitals. Is that correct?
I am almost certain that 50 states will participate in any convention of the states. Whether they agree with the purpose of the proposed amendment, like balanced budget amendment or not, for their own protection, they are going to send a delegation. So I expect there to be 50 state delegations at a convention.
And
that
who picks
means
the
that
delegates?
26 state delegations on the convention floor, the plenary session, 26 delegations, 26 states will determine what comes out of this convention,
Why is that?
because 26 is a majority of 50.
Got it. Okay. If they don't get 50 and they just get 33, then what would that math be?
34, let's say the 34 that are required to call the convention are the only
Okay.
ones that attend. Well, then on the convention floor, whenever there's a plenary session with all the state delegations present, then the majority of 34, which would probably be set at 18, because you can't have 17 versus 17. They probably establish 18 as the threshold for passing legislation if there were only 34 delegations present.
Yeah, it really is better if you get all 50 if they're going to do it, really.
And I think we will. I think definitely will. I think every state will want to be there for their own
Mhm.
purposes.
And they choose, again, they choose someone through their state. The state legislature picks those delegates. Who picks the
Yes,
delegates?
the state legislature will pick the delegates. And as I think I showed you in the simulated convention, that I think the state legislatures will choose their own state senators and representatives for this.
So
But
they'll pick
that
them.
doesn't mean
You
they
think,
couldn't take citizens off the street that they trust and with this kind of authority.
oh, that was my next question. So the state legislatures might pick someone from their own, which I think is the way they did it in the 1700s. But they may pick someone from their own state within their own state legislature, or they could pick a citizen that they just trusted.
It's entirely up to them.
Fabulous. Okay, I have so many more questions because I love this topic so much. I'm so glad you came on. You're brilliant. But this October, this October or October of
This
2026
this October is their target.
for a balanced budget amendment.
Yes.
And how many states do they have so far?
Well, 19 states participated in their 2017 event to come up with rules, and they came up with a very extensive set of rules. I see there's a question in Q&A about no mention of that. Well, there wasn't a very extensive set of rules they came up with, and I think in October that's exactly what they would abide by, is those rules from
So,
2017.
so they have 19 states, but they're going to need 33.
Well, yes, they had 19 states participate in 2017. If they issue a call here in the next few weeks or sometime in September I suspect that all 50 states would answer that call and send delegations
And how do they issue? I've got to go, but how do they issue a call?
by just publicizing like they did in 1786 after the Annapolis Convention. They published and sent to all the states a circular letter said, we are proposing a constitutional convention for next May in Philadelphia.
Okay. Thank you. I could go on forever. Kathy, please make sure everybody gets their 10 minutes. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Gary Porter. Appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Janine. And Jewel, we'll go to you.
Hello, Gary. Joel Gilbert here with
Hey,
Constituting
Joel, good to
America.
see you.
This is a fascinating topic that the listeners are very passionate about. There are so many questions in the Q&A that I am going to go fast because I think some of them have actually some deeper questions than I do. I'm learning quite a bit. I'm familiar with the Convention of States to an extent, but it's not a topic that I have studied a lot. So I think I'm learning more so than I have a whole lot of questions to ask that are come from like a standpoint of where I'm fully developed with an idea. So what I would like to get to though are a couple of big questions, which is that I think that overall I think younger people who respect the founding and believe that the country has gotten away from the founding principles are more inclined to be pro Convention of States because we've seen a country which seems to have thrown away a lot of the founding principles, even though we have the documents. We see our country not living by them.
Right.
And we're also young and more idealistic and more revolutionary. Whereas I think a lot of our parents' generation sees those same issues, but also sees the danger of opening up a convention that could be hijacked or could open up to whatever dangers that there are. What I wonder is that knowing that the all of the points that you just discussed, because you had listed the arguments against a convention, it seems like you included most of the arguments I could think of, and then you gave an answer to those arguments. But I wonder is there any way that is there any additional safeguard that you think we could create as a country or that we could even add to, or could Congress, I mean, I know there may be not an impetus politically, but could we pass any laws or do something that would allow us to have a convention of states and soothe some of those concerns? Since Congress is not going to, I don't believe either that Congress is going to restrain its own power. You had put that in one of your points for why we would need a convention. I agree because I haven't seen it do it. No matter how much we've asked for certain things, I haven't seen it happen. So I don't think that they're going to restrain their own power. But do you think that there would ever be a way that we could get them to create a rule set that we'd be able to have this convention and have more constitutionally minded people be comfortable and fully campaigning for it?
Well, we've already had 3 examples that I can cite now that have shown that a convention can establish rules that everyone agrees to, stick to those rules, and produce a product at the end of the event, a product being proposed constitutional amendments. I think we've demonstrated quite convincingly that that can be done. We have to go under the assumption that there are still honorable men and women in this country. And if we send them to this event with credentials that say, here is your authority and no more, then we have to suppose that they will honor their limitations.
Yeah, it almost seems like we have a wound that it seems like we don't trust that we will be
all
able to do
these
it.
state senators and state representatives have to live by the rules of their particular legislature every day they go to work. And so they're very, very comfortable with living within a set of rules.
And then my next question, which is a little bit more broad, and you can take it where you'd like. Maybe my final question, depending on how long of the question takes and how long the answer takes, is that America's interesting because so we had our founding, and at our founding, it was revolutionary, but it was revolutionary in an attempt to reach some truths that they believed were transcendent. And if you look at our founding documents, they're reaching for these transcendent ideals and then making them practical and trying to make a way of living them now. But it was revolutionary. And yet it was looking back as well, all of the traditions and all of the things that were gained and the knowledge that was gained by the Greeks and the Romans and the Magna Carta, etc. It was not throwing away the past, but it was also looking towards the future and trying to create something that was going to work and be incredible for the now. That revolutionary spirit seems to be like it seems to be unique among revolutions. If you look at the past and you try to point to successful revolutions or revolutionary spirit in general, there seems to be a huge contempt for tradition, and that contempt seems to win, and that contempt turns into violence. But in our founding, yes, there was contempt for certain traditions, but overall, it seemed to be a very different spirit. Now, what I wonder is that at a convention of states, would we, for there to be a positive outcome, for there to be a convention of states which enacted a political will of the American people that was a positive, would we need to somehow reclaim that spirit? Do you think that that spirit is still alive? If we don't have that spirit, are we doomed? What do you think about that?
Well, I think we have reached a point where the states have realized that Congress is not going to restore a limited and enumerated powers government. And if Congress isn't going to do it, it will only be done by the states. Now, when you go to a football game, do you expect the rules to be followed? When you go to a baseball game, do you expect the rules to be followed, or do you expect somebody to make things up as they go? So we as a people are quite content with limiting ourselves by a set of rules that have been agreed to in advance and living within that environment of rules. A convention of the states will be no different.
All right, we do so many questions. I'm going to pass to Emily, and if we want to go back to me, I can definitely ask some more.
All right, thank you, Jordan. I really appreciate, or thank you, Jewel. I'm sorry. I really appreciate this this topic. This is super interesting. So thank you, Mr. Porter, for spending your time with us. I just have a few short questions. I'll only take a couple minutes. So my first one would be, if there's a convention of states that has been called and there's support from 34 states and there's delegates, can Congress say, nope, like y'all aren't allowed to have this, or like is the convention of states, it just has to happen?
It has to happen. And that is demonstrated through the language of Article 5. When 34 states have applied, Congress shall call the convention. Shall does not give them any wiggle room. Now, there is an argument here. Congress has received far more than 34 applications. They've received 400 and some applications for a convention and have never called one. Why? Well, the standard argument is that there have never been 34 applications that have asked for a convention for the same purpose. That's the standard argument. And yet there's no reason, there's no obligation shown in Article 5 that the applications have to be for a single topic. So this group that I'm referring to is getting ready to sue Congress and force them to abide by Article 5, which levies upon them an obligation to call such a Congress, such a convention, when 34 or more applications have been received. It may take a suit. It may take the Supreme Court to order Congress through a writ of mandamus to actually abide by their obligation.
All right. Well, thank you so much for clarifying that. And I think my second question is, we've talked a bit about how the Convention of States is a check on the government. So is there a specific branch that the Convention of States checks and what makes it effective?
Well, the Convention of States could issue an amendment that would check any of the three branches. One of the proposals in this most recent simulated convention was to set the number of justices on the Supreme Court at 9. So if that was set through a constitutional amendment at 9, you could never have a Congress increase or decrease the number of justices. And, there's been a lot of talk about packing the court. Well, that kind of an amendment would put a stop to the idea of packing a court. So you could check the judicial branch. That way you could impose limits on Congress, the legislative branch. You could put limits on the executive branch through constitutional amendments. All three branches are subject to being checked through proper amendments.
All right, thank you. And I guess my final question, since I work with like a lot of kids and young people, if the question came up about what is a convention of states, what would be like a 30-second elevator pitch that I could give them just to explain it in a way that they could understand?
A convention of states is the states getting together to save our nation. And of course, that would generate more questions, but that's a good place to start.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I'll pass it off to whoever's next.
Well, thank you, Emily and Jewel and Janine and Gary. This has been really enlightening. So we're so happy to have you with us today. We have, as Jewel mentioned, we have quite a few audience questions. We're going to take a moment to thank our listeners in Las Vegas's KKVV 1060 AM on the radio dial. KKVV in Las Vegas airs Constituting America's Constitutional Chats Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific. So thank you to everyone listening in Las Vegas. We also want to give a shout out to a teacher who, besides Emily, and Emily, we're so happy to have you as a teacher on our panel today. And again, one of our former contest winners. We also have Caroline Evans on as a teacher who is watching today. So Caroline, thank you for joining us. If you are a teacher or a student and would like a shout out before the end of this program, please drop your name in the Q&A and we'll be sure and get to you before we close out. So we have got so many audience questions. Gary, we're going to start with Lewis White, who asks and makes a good point, I think. I'm trying to scroll down to find it. Lewis says, regardless of the outcome of the convention, doesn't it also have to be ratified by the states?
Absolutely.
Just the
And
delegates
that is
themselves.
the final check and balance. That is
Right,
a check and balance on the convention.
exactly. And
If
that's
the
one thing I
convention
think.
produces an idea that doesn't make sense, 38 states are not going to ratify it.
Right. So no matter what the convention passes as far as an amendment, the state, 3/4 of the states, which would be 38, still have to go back and ratify it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Um, Second, we're going to go to John King here. And let's see, there's just so many questions. And I apologize. Gosh, sorry about the dead air here. We will go, because I just saw this one flash by as well. Mark Hill, in Gary's opinion, which 3 or 4 states will be the next to pass the Convention of States resolution?
Yes, good point. We have this coalition that's most recently working towards an October event, but Convention of States itself, the main national organization, has been working. Well, I became involved with them in 2014, and I know that I was not in the earliest stages of that, but they've been working for at least 10 or 15, maybe 20 years on getting states to pass the same exact call to Congress. And I think the numbers right now, about 19 states have done so, passed an exactly identical call to Congress. If they get to the 34, of course, we'll be waiting on Congress. Now, will Congress take those 34 identical applications as the mandate to actually call the convention, or will they obfuscate and try to get around it, in which case the courts would have to get involved.
Well, thank you for that. And then John King says, I've often heard that a repeal of the 17th Amendment was on the agenda for the Convention of States. To repeal the 17th Amendment would restore the state legislatures to have voting oversight of the federal legislative process in the U.S. Senate. I did not hear any reference to repealing the 17th Amendment in the opening presentation. Any comments on repealing the 17th Amendment?
Well, yes, it was in the opening comments. Maybe this gentleman came in after my slides, but that was a an idea, and if I was in charge of setting up a convention, that would be my number one topic. My number one objective would be a repeal of the 17th Amendment. I think that is absolutely essential to restore federalism, which when the 17th Amendment was ratified, it was the best example of the states shooting themselves in the foot that I could ever come up with. It neutered their ability to control what happened in the Senate. And I think restoring the state's control over the Senate's legislative agenda would do a lot in putting brakes on some of the unreasonable ideas, to use your phrase, your unreasonable ideas that Congress comes up with from time to time.
Well, thank you. And we've got quite a few questions from Jordan Ulrey, who is a New Hampshire state rep. And one of the things that Jordan points out is that that there is also in Article 5 an explicit provision for a convention of state legislatures. And is that
I'm not sure where I see that in Article 5.
Okay, he says there is
Well,
Article
it is
5, an
this-
explicit provision for a convention of state legislatures. The term legislatures is specific and applies only to the single unicameral body and the other 49 bicameral lawmaking bodies, exclusive of the judiciary and executive branches. And I think he's questioning uh, the Convention of the States as a nonprofit organization versus maybe initiatives out there by the state legislatures.
Well, the state legislatures have to originate the call to Congress.
Okay.
So it's not the Convention of States organization that is actually producing the call to Congress. The state legislatures are in fact producing the call to Congress. It is their initiative to do so. Convention of States organization can't force them, can only encourage them to do so. And so when that call occurs, it is an official representation of the desire of the legislature of that state.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then Martha Jenkins asked, the Convention of States action has stated that the convention would only be to propose a balanced budget amendment and term limits amendment. The simulation convention went beyond that. If Congress does not set the rules of the convention, couldn't the convention delegates adopt rules to propose more than these two issues?
Well, the answer is absolutely yes, and I think they would, because consider this: you assembled 50 state convention delegations. If this is going to go on all year, no one wants this to go on forever. So there has to be some limitation that the convention itself agrees to focus their energies on something that's achievable. Remember, they must produce amendment ideas that they think are going to be ratified by 38 states. To produce an amendment idea that they know is not going to be ratified by 38 states wastes everyone's time. So they have to thoughtfully consider what can get 38 ratifications, what possibly could get 38 ratifications, and let's focus on those subject matters.
Well, thank you.
I do want to give a shout out to a lot of people from the Convention of States organization who I know have logged on today because they were told about this presentation. So they're doing good work.
Well, and yeah, thank you to all of our audience members and for everyone's really great questions. Russell Byer says several states have passed legislation that provide for delegate selection, direction, recall, replacement, and even punishment for getting out of order. Virginia will have such legislation. Are you familiar
Yes,
with that?
Russ, that's a very good point, and a lot of legislatures have done that. Remember, this delegation represents the state legislature. And the state legislature can put as many constraints on their own delegations as they wish. They can put penalties in place if they deviate from the authority they've been given in their credentials. They can make this as tightly or as loosely controlled as they wish for their delegation. And every state, I think, it has both a responsibility and an interest in keeping their delegation tied to certain limits.
Well, thank you for that. And Caroline Evans, who is one of our teachers watching, says, hello from Texas. Thank you for the excellent offering for our students. So, Caroline, again, we're so glad to have you and your students watching. And going back up here, let me just pop up to the top here. Rochelle Porto asks, can you show me where in the U.S. Constitution describes how a constitutional convention will happen? If there's no constitutional authority, how do you decide? She's also wondering if the simulation was nonpartisan, if there were any Democrats involved in the simulation.
There
Uh,
were, and I'm aware of that there are Democrats involved in this most recent coalition effort as well. See, it is in the Democrats as well as Republicans' best interest to have a limited Congress. That is the central point. Everybody, every state, no matter what their partisanship, can benefit from having a limited Congress. And so that's the goal.
well, thank you. And then we also have an audience member asking if people want to get involved in this movement, how is the best way for them to do that?
Well, the Convention of States website, conventionofstates.com, all one word.com, has a way to sign up for newsletters and information about the status of their program. I would encourage that. I've not looked at these other two websites that I showed briefly as to whether there's a subscription capability on those or not. You'll have to go out and see. I don't have the names in front of me. One of them is standingforliberty.com. So definitely, if you want more information about this, go to conventionofstates.com and sign up to be on their mailing list.
Well, thank you. And then we also have a question, which states so far, if you know, have passed the balanced budget amendment?
Well, they've called for a
Call
convention.
for a convention
Yes,
for the
and
balanced
I don't
budget.
have that list in front of me. This new initiative, since it's focused on balanced budget amendment, probably has that information at their fingertips. They believe it is more than 34. I've heard the number of 38. They believe it's 38 states have called for a balanced budget amendment. So that is above the threshold of 34. Congress should have acted already.
Okay, and then finally, I know you touched a little bit on the Phoenix Convention. Could you talk just a little bit more about that? Because we have several of our listeners who have asked about the Phoenix event, and they're saying that it was important and valuable because it was formed at the request of a state. Uh, so do
Yes,
you,
as different from the simulated convention I participated in, it was a product of the states themselves, not an outside organization. And
okay,
those go to standforliberty.com's website. There's details, there's videos that I think they'll find informative.
okay, well, great. Well, we are right at the top of the hour, and so we thank you so much for your time. I think we could easily go another hour or two
Oh,
on this
yes.
topic. We have a lot of people that are very passionate about it, watching, both people in favor of it and people who are not in favor of it. But we really appreciate your expertise on this and your joining us today.
My
And I
pleasure.
just want
Anytime.
to, Janine, do you have any closing comments?
Yes, I just want to say, Gary Porter, thank you. This was simply terrific, and it's exciting, I think, for the American populace because it's empowering. And I think that's what the checks and balances of the government, the Constitution gives us, is power more than just to vote. We can actually make a difference in so many different areas, and this is one of them. So I think that's why we see such a great audience today and a lot of buzz and excitement. And I want to get involved in this. I think it's really interesting. But Gary Porter, you did a great job showcasing this and helping us understand it. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Janine.
Thank you, Gary. And Emily, thank you. We love having our former contest winners on, and we're so proud of you for going into the teaching profession. And I guess you're going into your second year teaching now. Is that right? That's great. And Jewel, thank you so much. And Janine, thank you. And thank you to our audience. And we'll see y'all next week, Tuesday at 2 Eastern.